So I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Reverend Canon Dr. Mark Powley. Mark Powley. So he works for the Faith in the North Archbishop of York's Mission Enabler team. So now you understand why we asked him, and he has kindly accepted. He is a teacher. He is a theologian. He is obviously a priest, but more so, he is a missioner. And thank you, Mark, for being with us this morning. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Javed, and thank you, Leah. It's wonderful to follow such a clear and inspiring exegesis of Scripture. So thank you very much for having me. And I choose to believe the story that I was that one name. I choose to believe that. Who knows what they really discussed, but let's imagine that's how it worked. That sounds good. So yes, my name is Mark Powley. I'm Archbishop's Mission Enabler for the North. And what we do as a team is under the banner, as Javed said, of Faith in the North. I've put a few flyers around some of the tables about that work, because we are about to, in 2 years' time, we celebrate 14 centuries ever since St. Paulinus baptized King Edwin in York in a church which the Venerable Bede tells us was hastily constructed for that purpose. Ever since that happened in 627, there's been 14 centuries of continuous mission in the North. And we receive that baton and we run with it. That's our race, to run with that baton. And I love that thought, to run like winners. What a fantastic thought, to run like winners. And so Faith in the North is really seeking the renewal of faith through prayer, through storytelling, and through church planting, because every church was planted once. All of the churches we're representing here today, just think how many churches are represented in this room. Every church was planted by somebody who had a vision, an idea to build something, to start something. And so that's part of my work, is just to encourage that. And it's wonderful to have Mussarat, who's part of our team, who's working with intercultural church planting. And there's a whole team of us, and all of us focus on something different. And that's where Toby on our team is in Manchester today at the Intercultural Kingdom Conference, where he's representing the team as well. And so it's just a joy to be with you. That's the sort of thing that we are doing. And last month, we were working with schools across the North, saying the Lord's Prayer together. And this week, I had the privilege of getting ready some of our resources for next year, where we're encouraging every church to consider being a pilgrim place and opening up their doors for people on a journey of faith. There's more you can find out about in the leaflets and at our website, Faith in the North. Now, I don't know if anybody was at the Diocesan Development Day last month. Was anyone at the Diocesan Development Day? Good, very, very holy. These people over here, very, very holy group. If you were there, don't worry, I'm not going to say. I was invited there as well, and I said to Archdeacon Javed, I said, look, I'm doing the Development Day. You don't want me to, people to have too much of one thing. And he said, it's all right, Mark. Most of them won't be there. And he was right. And anyway, I'm going to say something different. So what I wanted to do was I wanted a Bible passage for churchwardens. Okay. And I didn't just want to bring a passage that was for you. I wanted a Bible passage that was like perfect for churchwardens, that was about churchwardenly things. A Bible passage that could have been written by churchwardens. And I think I found it. And it was what we had read to us earlier, which is Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6. And we had it read to us beautifully. And so I think I'm not going to read it again, but I'm just going to I'll read you maybe the very heart of it, and then we'll just pray as we reflect on what that has to say to us this morning. Let me read you the very heart of it. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "That would take almost a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5, and 2 fish. Then Jesus told them to make all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Let's just take a moment to pray as we reflect. Loving God, speak to us again through these words we've heard once and now we've heard them again. Now write them on our hearts. In Jesus' name. Amen. So, do you know that this is one of the stories, accounts in the Gospels that is in all 4 Gospels? Did you know that? It's very rare. Very rare for something to be in all 4 Gospels. But this one is, but the best one for Churchwardens is Mark chapter 6. Why? Well, first, there is a logistical challenge. Okay? You've got basically, Jesus says, "Come away with me by yourselves and get some rest." In other words, it's a church away day. Come away with me by yourselves and get some rest. And then this is followed by an unplanned bring and share meal. Okay? All this needs organizing. And who does the organizing? Exactly. Second, there is counting. There is counting. There are groups of 50s, so they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s, 50 here, 100 there, and the number that had eaten all in total, counting just the men, let's not go into that, but they did anyway, 5,000. Who does the counting? Exactly. I was going to say the one thing they didn't do was write the number down in a book. But then I realized they did write the number down in a book. Mark's Gospel is the book. And last of all, as if that were not enough, the away day, the bring and share meal, the counting, finally, somebody has to clear up. And who has to clear up? The Churchwardens. So this is the most churchwardenly passage in the whole Bible, maybe. Let's say today that it is. This is yours. This is your scripture. But apart from that, what does this story really mean? Now, it doesn't mean that we'll never go hungry. Because Jesus went hungry. Not just when he was being tempted, but also he was hungry and thirsty, sat by a well, John chapter 4. Paul talks about going without food. So it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that we'll always have big crowds of people. It's lovely to be part of a big crowd this morning and be wonderfully hosted. But it doesn't mean that, because Jesus knew that the crowds would go away. And he warned people. sometimes love will grow cold, and few will be taking the narrow way that leads to life. So it doesn't mean that. What does it mean today? The passage is about Jesus. It's about Jesus. It's about how Jesus opens up the surprising abundance of God. Jesus opens up the surprising abundance of God. The writer Alan Hirsch wrote in his blog recently, "The synoptic gospels are charged with God. They convey a natural yet supernatural quality, exhibiting a human nature that seems to be filled with and reaches back into something else. Like a great work of art, the Gospels continue to give more and more light and food, revealing greater depths of significance as we mature in understanding. By contemplating the vivid life of Christ, who Jesus is, what he does, and how he does it, the light of reality floods our inner lives, revealing to us God's particular way of being human." I like that. God's particular way of being human. So this passage gives us light today. It gives us food today. How? How does it feed us? Well, I believe this morning that it opens up for us this attitude of abundance, which is a little bit like running like winners, actually. It's what you could call a loaves and fishes mindset. Jesus had it, the disciples learnt a bit of it, and we can pick it up too. And that's what I want to reflect on just briefly with you now, before then we have a little bit of time to chat around the tables on how it relates especially to the intercultural work of the church in a diverse world. And the thing I really want to bring out is that there's a big shift at the heart of the passage that we've reflected on. A big shift. We've seen that it starts with this challenge. There are these thousands of people that need to be fed. So a massive challenge. But actually, the disciples are taking unexpected, it's often the way in Mark, isn't it? In Mark's gospel, the disciples are taking the wrong approach to the challenge. That's the issue. So that the problem isn't the 5,000 people. The 5,000 people is actually doable, it turns out. The problem is the way the disciples are approaching it. That's the problem. See, they thought that their job in all this was to worry about it. They thought their job was maybe to object to it and say, well, hold on, that's not going to work, is it? And they thought their job was to maybe send people away. And that was the problem. They were approaching it the wrong way. It wasn't something to worry about. It wasn't something that they had to object to. It wasn't something they needed to send people away over. They thought the challenge was to deal with it out of their meager resources. Who's going to pay for this? Am I going to pay for this? They thought that was the challenge. That wasn't the challenge. The challenge was to open up to something new. That was the challenge. Can you open up to something new, something you weren't thinking of, something you don't have and don't know how to do, but Jesus is going to provide? Could you do that one thing? Could you have a loaves and fishes mentality where you're willing for God to give you a surprise? That's the one thing they needed to do. That's what this story is about. They had to be open to a new source, that God was going to bring something working with what they had to hand, just 5 loaves, 2 fishes, whatever they could find. They just had to start looking. Rather than starting panicking, they had to start looking. That was the shift. And they had to be willing to create, well, quite literally, some new groups. Let's create some groups. Let's have a group of 50 over here, and let's have a group of 100 over here. I mean, it's like the tables here. Let's gather people round in groups. Let's create some new groups. If it was the Church of England doing that, of course, we'd need a name for the groups, like a technical name, like an extraordinary ecclesiastical grouping. Or maybe we call them new eating communities, or fresh expressions of dinner. So they had to create these new groups. And they had to create these groups not knowing what would happen. That was what they had to do. Sit them down in 50s and 100s, and they're sitting them down, they're gathered around the tables, kind of waiting for something, but they didn't know what was going to happen. And that was the step of faith. Can you create a group and let something new take shape, even though you don't know what's going to happen? That was their task. So Jesus is really trying to change the way the disciples are thinking. He doesn't want them just to see the problems. He wants them to see the opportunities. He wants them to see that if they're willing to ask some new questions, like a question, what do we already have? What do we already have, and what could we create as a new group that might help something new to happen, or a new way at an old question? And then somehow, from somewhere, provision will come. And I think this is what is happening in the Church of England. We have lots of, I'm going to put it out there, we have lots of challenges and lots of problems. It is, as Bishop Leah said, it's a complicated world in which we're doing mission. And if you read the book of Corinthians, as she said, you've got lots of problems in a church that's wrestling with those problems. It's very easy to be anxious. It's natural, in a way, natural to be concerned. Where are we going to get the resources to gather people? Who's going to pay? Are we going to have to just send people away and say, oh, church is shut this week, we can't do it? But a funny thing is happening at the same time. It's something you see in the Gospels again and again. Jesus doesn't just teach the disciples this once. He teaches it them several times, all the way through, in fact. Do you know, when he says, you're in the boats, you're fishing one way, why not try casting your nets on the other side? Do something new, see what happens. I'm going round to these villages. Why don't you go round to the villages? Villages I haven't even gone to yet. In twos, why don't you go off? See what happens. See what happens. Don't take anything with you. See what happens. And here, why don't you just sit the people around in groups without any food yet? See what happens. He is schooling them, discipling them, teaching them this loaves and fishes mentality. And so it is for us today. If we only see the problems and the challenges, we will miss something quite incredible. But if we're willing to try something new and to receive from an unexpected source, then new things can and will occur. Let me give you an example of this. I get to go around to different dioceses. It's a real privilege to get to drive around the north of England, which I love. And just last year, I got to go to Chester. And there's a wonderful group of people talking about starting new things in their churches. And there was, we were in a conversation, and we were talking about starting new things. And somebody said, well, the thing is, my church is a grade 2 listed building. It's a grade 2 listed building, and we are responsible for a graveyard. So there's a lot of volunteer work that needs doing. And if we started something new, it would kill the congregation. It would destroy, the word was destroy, it would destroy the congregation because everybody's just maxed out. There's just nothing more to give. And I thought to myself, well, I can't answer that. I'm not the incumbent of a grade 2 listed building. I'm not responsible for a churchyard. I can't imagine what the answer to that question is, but there was somebody else on the table, a guy called Arthur. And Arthur wasn't ordained, he's just a lay volunteer. And he said, that's funny, he said, we've got a tin church. A little tin church. And we had a handful of people in that tin church, less than 10. And we wanted to start a community cafe. And we got 50 volunteers. And I'm sat there thinking, hold on, you've just said you got less than 10 people in your church. How do you get 50 volunteers? Like, that's not good maths. I mean, it turns out it is good maths. It's kingdom maths. It's kingdom maths, because what they did is they said, we want to have a community church, a cafe. So they went out to the local community. They said, who's going to help us? Who would like to see this cafe? So somebody gave a legacy. Somebody who was a builder came and worked and developed the back of this little tin church. Somebody baked cakes. Somebody joined a rotary. They got their 50 volunteers. And I said, but what happened to the church? Like, did it kind of kill you just to run this community cafe? He said, no, the church tripled. And of 27 people who go to that church now, 22 of them came back to church through the cafe. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? They just started something new. They didn't know how it was going to happen. And God provided through an unexpected source. So we were doing this session. I said, can I come to your... He said, what are you doing after this? He said, I'm going to the cafe to go and help out. I said, can I come too and have a coffee? And I did. I got a free coffee and a cake. Thank you. So isn't that amazing? That's the mentality that I think is at the heart of the passage we just had read to us. A friend of mine, Phil, who I got to know back when I was at university in Nottingham, he is planting a church in Stockholm in Sweden. And Phil and his wife went there with his wife's mum, and that was the church planting team, a church planting team of 3. And they went to this city. They couldn't speak Swedish. And the first thing they did was they learned Swedish. They're very good. They went off to this place. They learned Swedish. And they thought, we're going to start a church in Swedish. So they start meeting and they start studying the Bible. They start opening up this church in Sweden. Oh, I'm nearly there, but I'm not there yet. Just give me 1 minute. They started. It's coming. It's really good. And they started this church. They thought we're gonna gather people in Swedish. Could they gather people in Swedish? No. But they could gather people in English. I mean, slightly unsurprisingly, it was their native tongue, and that was who God brought. So they actually ended up, by accident, starting an international church in Stockholm, speaking English, some Bible study groups, then they multiplied the groups, they gathered together, they started to grow a small church. And then it came time to plant their first new congregation in the afternoon, and that congregation spoke Congolese. That was the next step. English to Congolese, because a Congolese pastor said, look, my people are in this city. I'd love to gather them. Could we work with you? And Phil said, yeah, let's work together. So they've got an English and a Congolese congregation. And then the third congregation they planted was Swedish speaking. And I remember just thinking, oh goodness, God is trying to teach me something. God is trying to teach me something. Where are the resources for the church going to come from? They're going to come from a new place, from all of the places and the cultures and the languages that God has brought to this country and to Europe. And all of the gifts and the life and the energy that these folk bring, and all of the lessons that we need to learn. And some of those are difficult lessons about our history and about what it means to share. That's what God's doing. That's how he's feeding the church. Through the diverse and wonderful cultures that he's brought to our cities and our towns and our communities. That's how he's feeding the church. That was a big realization for me. Now, I need to finish. I'm going to ask you to give you some questions. You have a few minutes to chat around the tables. To have a loaves and fishes mindset is to say, God, don't just show me the problems in the church. Don't let me stay stuck in the same approaches. Open my eyes to where you are bringing the resources from. Show me the new groups we should be making. It may start smaller than I'd hoped, just 5 loaves to feed 5,000 people, but I'm willing to open my hands and receive whatever you give me, and then to share it. You notice when Jesus gives out the bread, it says there was enough for everyone. They share it out equally. This is a church that takes everybody seriously. Every language, every culture, every need, every gift, it's shared out equally. What does that mean for our church today? So finally, just to leave you with this slide, thank you for bringing it up there. What could this look like? So many different things. But it doesn't just look like one thing. You're going to have to work out what it means for you, where you are, as you answer the questions that Bishop Leah gave us. So it might be a language-specific congregation. So it might be a Tamil congregation. We've seen people singing in Urdu. There's a church in Stockport. Somebody went, they said, well, we're going to start a Cantonese congregation in the afternoon. So it could be that. It could be moving from landlord to partner. So there's a church, St. John's in Bradford, they had a Nepalese congregation, wanted to use their buildings. They said, please do use our buildings. But how can we work together? And to be honest, they didn't know how to work together. They said, well, look, we're a Nepalese congregation, you're an English congregation. They were the landlord. But then the vicar, John, said, well, why don't we eat together? And so I got the privilege of going there every Sunday after the English congregation meets. There's a lunch every Sunday with rice every Sunday, and they eat together every Sunday. They've moved from landlord to partner. It could be a dual language parish. In Elephant and Castle in London, they've got a Spanish and English church. But they don't just meet in Spanish and in English, which they do, but the PCC is a joint Spanish-English PCC. And they've seen wonderful growth through that. It could be intercultural worship, and we've experienced that and a taste of that this morning. It could be an international church, like in Fountains Church, Bradford. They've got an international church where there's a mix of different cultures, and the emphasis is on bringing those together. Or it could be an integrated congregation. So tomorrow at St. George's Leeds, where me and my family worship, there'll be over 100 Farsi-speaking Christians. And on Tuesday, I'll get to be with them for one of their study groups. And whenever the sermon is given, it's translated live into Farsi so that you can have, it's an integrated congregation with different languages at the same time, but through translation. So many different ways to do it. And this is so different to how the Church of England was 50 years ago. But it is the provision of God. This is how God is gathering us into new groups and feeding us. All we need is that loaves and fishes mentality. And who knows what God will do. So let me close with these questions then. These are my questions that hopefully build on what we've already been thinking about. How might God be providing resources in your parish through the multiple cultures that are represented there? And secondly, how could you partner with this by trying something new? So I think we've got some time now to chat around tables. Again, it might be the whole table, or it might be just in sort of 2s and 3s, a couple of groups around the table. I'm very happy to see how those discussions go.
Okay, my name is Musarat Iqbal. Okay, I know, and by default, I'm your Archdeacon's wife. But my main job, I'm on my own. I'm Musarat, and I work with the Faith in the North. And my role is North Mission Enabler Intercultural. So if any question, if you want me to come and visit your church or local church with interculture, please let me know, and I'm happy to leave my details with you. So then it'd be easy to navigate within the diocese, because I live in Doncaster and I can come and tell you my story and see how we can work together. So that's I was just going to say. Yes, you can ask question my boss, but just tell him I'm also said I can come and visit you.